attending the must-see panel of the day, and who could imagine that having an accountant, a lawyer, an IT geek, and someone that works for the police, essentially, would be the panel of dreams. But here we go. This is what we've got. So cybercrime, a topic that's, well, it used to get talked about all the time until ChatGPT came along, and now seems to have slipped down the agenda, but it's probably one of the most important things for businesses to be on top of, and probably one of the most challenging things to get right in terms of protecting your business, particularly in the context of everything that's going on in the world and the competing demands for businesses to invest in their technology and in their protection. So we're going to cover a few things in the half hour that we've got in terms of how best to go about protecting your business and your organization, what to do if you are attacked, and what your response should be, and hopefully we'll give you a few takeaways at the end. Just a reminder that you can log into Slido and ask questions. If there are no questions coming up, I'm going to make the assumption that this has been the best panel organized and done by me. So if you want to challenge my ego, by all means ask questions, because they're probably going to be better than the ones that I'm going to ask. But if I can just hand over to Niomie first, I'd love if you could just go through some of the things that you're seeing with your work at the Northwest Cyber Resilience Centre, and what are the sort of the key things that SMEs need to consider to sort of help protect themselves.
Yeah, hi everybody. I should start by saying I am not the police, so nobody please confess any crimes to me. So we are a police-led business. Basically what we do is across the Northwest is support SMEs with cybersecurity. We do this through various funding. And one of the funding pots is proceeds of crime. So we use that money that's taken from crime and we reinvest it back into the region to give cybersecurity support to businesses. So our members consist of everyone up from sole traders right up to medium-sized businesses, and some of the key things that we see when we're working with our clients is particularly around what's affecting them, and that is mainly phishing. Phishing is a real problem. It's not something that's going anywhere anytime soon, despite efforts to put in sort of filtering through email filters and that sort of thing. What we're finding is education is a big factor in business, and it's training employees, that sort of thing. Some of the key, we do some testing, we do simulated phishing. And I had a look through to sort of pick out some key themes, what people are interacting with. And interestingly, it's parcel emails, so you have a parcel being delivered. It's wire transfers, which is unusual if your business is not dealing, if that's something that you don't normally deal with. And also news articles as well. So one of our most popular ones was something to do with one of the royal family members in the subject line, and that got quite a lot of interaction. So for us, we reiterate a lot about training and having that culture of a good cyber posture within your business and your employees to know what to look out for when it comes to phishing. So that's a real big factor for us.
Super. And Harman, maybe if we can expand on that. I mean, I know when we were prepping for the session, because contrary to popular belief, I do actually organise and prepare myself occasionally. You talked about some of the challenges for organisations in terms of the cultural changes and the challenges around balancing the challenge of people, process, and technology. So could you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, John. Thanks, Niomie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so by profession or by work, our job is to just help customers advise around finding their unknowns in their environment, what they don't know about their business. Obviously, they know about their business more than you. So we leave them with the information about the flaws that they should be looking into fixing with informed decision making rather than telling them this product is better than the other, because technology is changing and it's changing rapidly, as we all know. So that brings in the change, and that change must be measured at people, process, and tech levels. And when we combine them all together, I think that's the real sort of like a push factor that brings in the improvement. because it's all part of risk management by domain if you look at it from a higher sort of like a overview level. And risk is all about reducing the probability of any futuristic events. And there's no immediate ROI linked with it to say tomorrow you can bring it down this one, because if you're in advertising or something related to direct sales impact, you can show it. But when it comes to cybersecurity, it must be a business case straight from top to the bottom. And cultural change is one of that biggest elements, because just the policies on the wall won't serve it. You need your people to support this as a movement. And then you need the right tools, which comes in the form of technological controls. And then you need your processes so that people can follow those together to make it a positive change. That's what we preach.
Perfect. And I wonder, I'll come back to you in a second, Harman, but I wonder if we could have a quick show of hands from the audience. How many people who run a business or run an organization, how many people have technology and cybersecurity as part of your overall business strategy? So a few hands in the room, a few shy ones. Okay, interesting. That's interesting to see. And I mean, Harman, I think when we talked, we also sort of said, risk management was one of the key areas that businesses need to consider, and obviously cyber potentially a big risk, but maybe a little bit misunderstood.
Yeah, I think so. I think the cybersecurity as a business case is coming up with the win through a lot of other angles as well. If you look at it, for example, as a country, we have a big push on ensuring that cybersecurity export is one of the foreign policy's objectives as well. But also we are pushing it through many ways, not just supporting with innovation, for example. That's one of the things we got to win as well as part of the grant last year. But also through regulatory landscape. And that becomes as a, like a bit of a stamp on it. I'm not saying compliance is equivalent to security, that's another debate. But it just helps because regulatory ways help you to channel it in the right manner, because enterprises have different issues compared to the mid-market and then the SMEs. And our go-to-market is SMEs and mid-market, so we deal with different kind of fish than the enterprise.
Well, it tees me up well for Paul, because you mentioned compliance, and that just really floats a lawyer's boat, really. And so, Paul, we were talking about data protection by design, and some of the things that you'd seen out of a recent survey on terms of cyber attacks. So maybe you could just cover that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, of course. So, sort of my role in sort of advising on cybersecurity issues is typically, in the context of helping clients ensure data protection by privacy, and privacy by design. So that means exploring with them data collection processes, challenging the extent to which data needs to be collected and who it needs to be shared with, and advising on sort of things like anonymization processes. And we've done this recent survey in conjunction with Aon, so insurers, and interviewed over 130 people. And some of the sort of themes coming out of that were that more than 50% of the people interviewed fessed up to storing data for longer than is necessary, and more than 50%, don't know if it's the same 50%, fessed up to collecting data they didn't actually need. And both of those things increase exposure to cyber risk, and they also give you a GDPR compliance headache, because it's not quite in accordance with the principles that are set out in the UK GDPR. And sort of perhaps linked to all this and sort of echoing what Harman and Niomie have said, 50% admitted to there being a lack of training and awareness within their organisations. And so, that sort of ties in with what the Information Commission has been saying about the biggest threat from a cyber perspective is not hackers. It's a lack of sort of complacency within organisations, and he gives the example of a lack of training and awareness as part of that complacency, and he did that in the context of issuing a £4.4 million fine to Interserve after they'd suffered from a phishing attack. So it's an important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know certainly within the organisation I work for at Beever and Struthers, we spend a lot of time and effort on training and testing our staff, because the biggest weakness within any organisation in terms of cyber tends not to be technology, but it tends to be us humans, because unfortunately we are fallible and we're liable to click on those links or open those emails that maybe we shouldn't do. Harman, I'm going to come back to you, because you said something that really excited me when we talked, which is that passwords are sexy, and maybe maybe passwords and other layers of security are probably a little bit sort of undersold nowadays.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I said that, definitely. I think one of the things is, like we're moving on with all the other areas of technology, like we saw this mobile and cloud revolution in the last 3-4 years. Now ChatGPT has blown everybody away, with and the first element is curiosity, for example, everybody. So one of the things that stood out in the news was like 2-3 weeks ago, like one of the top banks, without naming shaming anybody, they just introduced a blanket ban on ChatGPT. So what that blanket ban means is, like in corporate environments, you just stop the users from accessing ChatGPT website in some manner of blocking anything. But can you block people really like that? That's the core, I think, a big no or a mistake, I would say, in that sense, because people being people, we all are curious by nature, and something that is bringing some sort of like a revolutionary change throughout the planet. You can't stop people from not searching about this. They can be doing it home with their personal accounts from, let's say, accessing Bard with Gmail account or ChatGPT. They can buy their own subscription. You can't stop them. But the best way is to tackling the problem from a constructive angle, like why can't you explore what's good for us and what's not good for us, and then make it possible through, again, I'm going to bore you to death with this people, process, and tech together, so that you're not like being a blocker with this. Maybe you can innovate and make it to a good use, good business case as well, So
Perfect.
I think it's important to do it rather than just ignoring the problem and saying, no, we won't deal with it. So.
Yeah, and Niomie, I think you mentioned as well that the challenge for business as well is this blurring of the lines between what is business and what is personal, and obviously people will be using their mobile devices and maybe using work laptops for personal use, and there are challenges around that, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some of our clients that we've spoken to about this, where we found this sort of thing, it's about introducing sort of policies and procedures in place for staff to make the lines clear that they should not be using work email addresses for personal use to place their orders, do the Tesco shopping or other supermarkets, that is just for work use only, because that only increases the risk. If they're using work emails outside of work, what else are they signing up for? What else are they clicking on? And potentially it's another gateway into your business.
And is that easy to enforce in reality? Because, it's so challenging these days, particularly when we're working in hybrid and post-COVID and everything else.
Absolutely. And I think with anything like this, it is a process. So depending on where you are in your cyber sort of resilience journey, it might be something that's a few steps down the line. However, if you have that in your strategy to work on, that's something you can work towards and bring it in as part of your culture. So when you have a turnover of staff, you've got these policies in place, and it's the expectation in your business of where you need to be. And that applies to all security policies as well. That's just like a snippet of what we see. You can do checks as well to see, obviously, if your domain emails are included in any data breaches. So that would probably be a good place to start. You can check that really easily, and then you've got an idea of how many of your staff are actually doing that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I suppose there's also a device management point, isn't there? So when COVID hit and we all started working from home, I was using my personal iMac for work, and you've got other things on your iMac that aren't controlled by my organisation, Mills and Reeve, and that adds to the cyber risk. And so one of the things we've been forced to do as an organisation, actually, because of the work we do with government bodies, so this is a requirement of Ministry of Defence, is we have to use now work devices. There's no longer any bring your own device acceptable policy for our work to sort of up the levels of security and control and devices we use.
And do you think, as organisations, we place too much focus on things like GDPR, data protection, and other things in terms of, in the context of cyber and data management? Does that sort of distract us away from the other risks that businesses face?
Good question. I mean, I suppose it's been helpful GDPR has been helpful in raising awareness of the importance of keeping data secure. So GDPR only relates to personal data. We need to keep all data secure, and I think I don't know. It's one of those things where if you're in tough times economically, where you're going to cut corners, potentially you might be tempted to cut corners on software and not updating and having in place the latest sort of software security systems. You might be tempted to cut corners on training your staff, and the GDPR message helps make sure that actually people aren't doing that, because ultimately.
Yeah, and Harman, I think that leads to something else that we discussed, which was, obviously, we've come out of COVID. Lots of businesses had to adapt to, the challenges around that, from working from home to, maybe providing remote access to systems and things. But again, in the context of where we are now economically, as well as a challenge for businesses to continue to invest and not take shortcuts. How do we kind of manage this complacency, or this potential complacency?
I'll be honest, it's not easy in the mid-market, especially in the SMB sector, because cybersecurity resources, products, skill sets are expensive. So an SME will be more worried about the main objectives first, right? Everything is down to revenue generating tasks first, and then you support the other areas. But the good out of this is businesses are now realizing that technology is the centerpiece, not just the add-on department. And the same way, I think the cyber needs to take that place as well, because it's not like small businesses are not the target. It's your information that you hold. You could be a supplier in the supply chain to some enterprise. You can still be, right? So you need to take on measures based on what you do in that context approach, and not do it, on the paper, tick in the box style approach. So this is what we try and preach, that not to do it. I mean, we ourselves as well, for example, we, whether even just a prospect looking for informal advice, they may not be a client tomorrow. So we always provide a different portal which we use, has got end-to-end encryption and deletes everything after 30 days, so that we don't keep anybody's data in our email boxes in case we are compromised tomorrow. You don't want to be, not doing what you should be doing responsibly. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Niomie, I think when we talked, you definitely identified there's a few key things that businesses can do, which are relatively low cost, and a couple of things that were mentioned, and I'll ask you to expand on those in a second. Was areas of challenge around asset management, again policies, which has come up more than once already in the discussion, and also doing things like assessing your suppliers and some of your other providers of services. So can you just expand on some of those, and what the sort of time cost and real monetary cost is in terms of getting those right?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly the challenges that we're seeing from our clients is budget, and the prioritising, obviously just making the business successful, and often cyber is on the back pedal or back foot, and I think what I would say to that is really have a think about your position should you be a victim of a cyber attack. We often get people coming to the Cyber Resilience Centre during an attack, and at this point there's very little that we can do to support them, and often they don't have the budget to go out and get incident response and things like that. So it puts them in a very difficult position and an incredibly stressful position, I must say. to try and salvage the business. Now, obviously, the advice would be, if it was a ransomware attack, to obviously don't pay, because we are a police-led business, so we don't want to interact with the criminals, but it does put businesses in a very, very difficult position. So we are all about the prevention. The preventative side for us is really important. There are lots of really, really simple, low cost effective measures that you can put in. The staff training as well, there's, there is lots of resource out there available. Sometimes it's probably too much and it is a little bit overwhelming. We can support with that. We like to guide people and point them in the right direction with that, and we do provide training, but the NCSE is the national body for cyber advice, and they have lots of sort of different various bits of information, one particularly on phishing, for example. So if you wanted to start somewhere, I would say education of staff around phishing, to try and reduce that risk of somebody clicking on a malicious link and getting into the business.
Well, you teed me up perfectly for the next question, which was, what happens if you do suffer an attack? And maybe in some cases there's a certain inevitability that you may suffer one, irrespective of what you do. So, Paul, since this is a potential compliance issue, can we just talk quickly about what happens in terms of GDPR and what businesses' responsibilities are?
Of course, yeah. So. If there's a personal data breach, so personal data is involved in the cyber attack, then there's unless that is unlikely to result in a material risk to individuals' rights and freedoms, then there's a duty to report that breach to the Information Commissioner's Office without undue delay, and sort of the aim is within 72 hours. If you don't do it within 72 hours, you've got to give good reasons why you haven't done so. And then also there might be a reporting obligation to the individuals themselves who are concerned. And I think that 72-hour window is comparatively short, so I think it's really important that that there is a plan in place for dealing with the cyber breach, and people know who needs to be involved in sort of dealing with the aftermath. So there's going to be tech teams involvement. But then there's probably also a need for legal advice, and indeed, actually, if you use external lawyers, then that can be helpful to protect through privilege communications and documents that are generated in that period. But then also importantly, I think that there's going to be insurers needing to be involved, and it's better to have the insurance in place before the incident happens than as a sort of afterthought squabbling around.
Perfect. And Harman, I think one of the other challenges around, if you do suffer an attack is probably whether or not businesses are properly prepared and whether their plans, the plans that they think they have in place have been tested. So, that's an area that you certainly help businesses with, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we always want to make sure that this point is heard, that you need to stay prepared, what to do in that event, not that you are stuck in that situation and you don't know who are the right partners to rely on, especially in the mid-market sector, because you don't have internal full-fledged incident response teams who can work on it quickly, because there are two aspects to any event. How do you reduce the impact as soon as possible? So if you got these processes in place and there has been drills in the past, you know who the right people to reach out to and how to act in those situations. It's like a similar analogy to a fire drill, why we do that. So that people know, where the exits, where to look for these green signs to go out. So I think same is on this side. It's just that we are dealing with the IT landscape here.
Yeah, and one of the other points I think you made was that you've got to be wary of the fact that we're talking about cybercrime, and I guess we kind of immediately think of criminal gangs in Russia or Iran or wherever it might be, hacking into businesses. But actually, there is an internal risk as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean both sides, because for cybercriminals this is an excellently lucrative market, because the investment is quite small and the returns are like manifold. I mean, I don't want to go on that side of the model, but what was the other part, sorry, you were asking?
I was more about the internal risks as well.
Internal, it's coming from, if you look at why financial markets have these stringent regulations internally as well, audits, and that's expanded on the cyber side, where these threats could be, disgruntled employees or could be someone in your supply chain. So that's hugely important. I mean, look at these days. I'm just literally coming back yesterday from InfoSecurity Europe, London, and the one common theme was like API security everywhere, because we are so reliant on it. Whether it's health tech, for example, it's probably gone 400% since COVID. The amount of data being consumed, the sensitive data is all through APIs now. It's not like you know, the previous approach that what you don't see is probably behind the scenes is fine. So I think that begs the demand that how your business model is, even for the small health tech businesses, they need to separate and have segregations at user level, network level, environment level, you know, where they get the business from and where their people are sitting. So there has to be verifications at different layers in between that as well. But that's just one example. It changes to your business context. I mean, in fact, what you guys do and everybody else. So.
Yeah, perfect. And go on.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Niomie's obviously, you know, given the sort of party line, I think, and you know, the Law Society has the same message of don't pay ransoms. The National Cyber Security Centre says, you know, don't pay ransoms. But I suppose I've heard different views, and indeed insurers sometimes, you know, say, well, you need to consider it in the context of what's the impact on your organisation. If you're unable to operate for a period of time, that's going to do more damage potentially than paying the ransom, albeit, you know, in paying, you're potentially encouraging further cyber attacks. And actually, under English law, there isn't a blanket prohibition on paying ransoms, although you need to be careful if there's potential link that you end up paying terrorists or breaching sanctions. So it's not a straightforward area, but yeah, there are nuances to it, I guess.
Well, we have had an audience question, so it'd be remiss of me not to ask this. And by the way, my ego is now crushed, but it'll be okay, I'll recover. I'm going to direct this to you, Niomie. And the question is around employee benefit packages sometimes include or encourage the use of work email addresses for personal services, such as Amazon Prime. You know, do these increase the risk, and maybe how do businesses try and manage that or try and deal with that?
I would say if that's something as part of your employee package, then to have a policy that reiterates about, not policy, more about training, about phishing. So if they're using the work email address to access that service, for example, the more educated they are on phishing and the risks and what to look out for, what not to click on, will reduce that risk for that service.
Perfect. And we're getting close to the end of our time, so I'm going to briefly wrap up, and then we can escape, and I won't get dragged off stage. But I think in terms of what we discussed, I mean, clearly we could carry on for a long, long time, and there's lots more nuance in this discussion and much more depth than we can ever cover in sort of half an hour. But I think in terms of like some of the key takeaways that I asked the panelists to sort of give me, so that I could sound relatively insightful for the last 30 seconds, was that you know, there's a few basic things that businesses can do. You know, one of them is make sure there's a plan in place and make sure that you've tested it, so that if you are, you know, if you do fall victim to an attack, that at least you know what your response should be. You know, and I think that we were given this concept of, you know, fire drills in an office. You know, we're used to doing fire drills. As frustrating as those are, because we never want to stand on the car park in the rain. Same thing from a cyber risk point of view. The other thing was, you know, measure and be proactive around user access control and authentication. So I think we've kind of touched on that point a few times now in terms of having the right policies in place. And the final one, which is really, really basic, really, but is ensuring that your software is up to date, you know, whether that's your firewalls, whether that's the day-to-day systems that you're using, whether that's stuff on your servers if you're still using them as well. And again, you know, a relatively easy thing to do, and hopefully a relatively low-cost thing to do that just, you know, enhances your security. So we've got 1 second left. I'd like to thank the panel and thank you for your time for listening to us.
Amazing. Thanks, John. Thanks to the rest of the panel as well. We're doing really, really well at keeping to time. I'm aware that my reputation precedes me, that I am a bit of a stickler for making sure that we do stick to time. Brilliant.